Y como me toca, tenéis en cada asiento un folletito de publicidad donde anuncia el nuevo posgrado, la nueva edición del posgrado de datos que hace la Cámara junto con la Universidad de Vic, del cual estoy muy honrado de formar parte, igual que Bernat, igual que Iván, igual que Diego, igual que, bueno, Alex Ayala, Nelson y Diana, etc, un montón de gente. Y además también anunciaros que Cambra va a hacer la segunda edición del curso de PL300, que dura también 44 horas. Es el mismo curso que hace Alex en Namas Data, pero ahora lo hace aquí con Cambra y encima lo tiene que hacer mejor porque yo le ayudo a hacer alguna de las clases y él las tiene que remontar después. Así que, nada, gracias a todos por venir. Simplemente comentaros esta cuña. Si alguien está interesado en la publicidad, tenéis un mail para enviar información. Y nada más. Le doy la palabra al maestro, que muchas gracias por venir y la clase es tuya.
Siempre queda aprovechado. Me puedo tomar frase. Ahora. El visual. Right? It's okay.
And I think I need to change the microphone to that. How can I change that? Audio setting.
USB audio. It's okay.
This is right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't need to change anything. Okay. I hope it is recording. So we'll see. Yes, yeah. It tells me I'm sharing, so. Okay, minimize this. Everything looking good. Right. Okay. Hola. That is the only word I know in Spanish. So. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for this session. Sorry, I can't speak Spanish, so you have to listen to my English speaking. Thank you for joining this session. This session is about using like what is in Microsoft Fabric for Power BI developers. How many of you using Power BI at the moment? Okay, that's what I expect. How many of you using Fabric? Not that many. How many of you heard of Fabric? Okay, a little bit more. Right, so let's go through that and we'll talk about some of those aspects of it. Okay, next slide, come on. Okay, I'm Reza. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP Regional Director based in New Zealand, the other side of the world. But I travel quite a bit doing training, consulting, and I've written some books. If you are interested in these books, you can go to our website, find the links to those books. I'm also writing blogs regularly and YouTube videos. So if you connect to Redicat, you'll find some information over there. How many of you have heard of Redicat? Oh, okay, nice. Welcome back. Right. Okay, so that's about me. Let's talk about Fabric. About 3 years ago, Microsoft, a big part of Power BI team in Microsoft, they moved to work on a secret project. And that secret project is what happened to be Fabric now. Do you know what was the name of that project internally? Yep. Trident. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. I don't have any prize to give you, but nice. Good job. So that project was called Trident. They always do that. Like they set an internal name for a project, and then when finished, they come with a new name. Anyway, so Project Trident, which happened to be Fabric, what is the reason for that? Why Microsoft tried to do that thing? So the reason is that when you are in data analytics space, when you want to do a data analytics project, one technology is not enough. You usually work with different technologies. We can check it right now. Like you're all working with Power BI, we know that. What other technologies you are working? Data Factory, Azure Data Factory. What else? Synapse, yep. What else? SQL Server, yes. More? Data lakes, yeah. SSIS, yep. Yep, sounds good. So as you hear, these are some of the technologies that you work, and the reason for that is that Power BI by itself is not enough as a data analytics technology. I mean, when you read Microsoft marketing materials, it says that Power BI can do everything, right? Well, it can do most of the things, like you can connect to a data source, you get data, you transform it, you build a data model, relationships, calculations, visualizations, all of those kind of things. But there are more in the world of data analytics that you cannot do with Power BI. For example, Power BI is not a data science tool. You cannot do any data science project with Power BI. You have to work with Python. You have to use things such as Azure Machine Learning. If you want to do like a database, relational database, you cannot do that with Power BI. You have to use SQL Server. You might go and use Snowflake, Azure SQL Database, Synapse, any of those technologies, right? If you are in a data analytics space, you basically need to learn quite a lot of different technologies. This is a screenshot of Azure portal for technologies in Microsoft data analytics space. Got like 10 different technologies. If we go to databases, there are 10 more over there. If we go to AI machine learning, there are 10 more over there. It's like 30 different technologies only in Microsoft. We are not talking about like Snowflake, Databricks. We are not talking about others yet. Only in Microsoft that you have to somehow know about these if you are in a data analytics space, which is quite a lot. It's complex, right? It takes time to go and learn each of these, learn it enough to be able to build a project with it, right? Not only that, each of these have their own portal, their own platform to go and build a solution. When you build Power BI solution, mostly you build it in Power BI desktop, you publish it to the Power BI service. When you go and build a Azure Data Factory solution, it's a different portal. It's an Azure portal. When you go and build a Synapse project, it's in a different place. Your SQL Server project is in SQL Server Management Studio. Each of them has their own tool and platform. Not only that, each of these has their own licensing, right? Like Synapse, licensing for Synapse is like 5 pages of licensing document. And at the end, like after you read all of that, you don't really understand what's going on. You just pay whatever they say you to pay, right? So it's complex. The idea for Fabric was to make it simpler, right? Exactly the same thing that Microsoft did with Power BI. We had Power Pivot and Power Query, Power View. It was possible to build a solution with them, but it was quite a bit of complex process. You get data out of Power Query, load it into a Power Pivot model, then build a Power View on top of it. They made it simpler with bringing Power BI like an umbrella. Same thing happens here with Fabric. Fabric is an umbrella on top of 3 main technologies in Microsoft, Power BI, Synapse, and Data Factory. These 3 technologies basically gives you a combined power of analytics, anything that you need, from connecting to the data, building the data transformation, loading that into a place that we can call it a data warehouse, a database, apply some data engineering concepts on it, such as, for example, doing a data exploration, a data preparation, then on top of it, building a data science project on a high-performance backend database that would basically work like a Synapse database. It also have features such as real-time analytics, and then at the end, you can build some visualization on top of it using Power BI as well, right? But when you build a solution in this platform, it's all in one place. You don't switch to go to Azure portal to do something, to then Power BI desktop to do something. It's all in one place. Not only that, it is also using a storage layer called OneLake, which is one storage layer across all of these. So any of these that need to store something or access that data, they all use that OneLake as a storage layer. The whole thing can be governed using Purview. Purview is not part of Microsoft Fabric. It's a separate thing that you need to purchase, but it can help with the governance in here. And of course, Copilot and AI agents are also supported different places across this platform, right? So basically what this gives you is a fully end-to-end data analytics solution in the cloud, which basically support all the requirements that you would have in a data analytics, right? So far, sounds good? Okay. That is pretty much all the slides I wanted to show you. The rest, demo. Okay, so I'm going to show you a demo of course, demoing all of these would take like 5 hours. I'm not going to demo all of that. I'm going to demo a little bit of data factory, OneLake, data engineering, and Power BI, right? Only those parts. The rest you can go and learn yourself. Okay, so I'll start with building a lake house, and then a data flow that loads data into that, a data pipeline for orchestration, a shortcut. You'll learn about all of that as well, the structure of the data tables in Fabric, and then finally we build a Power BI semantic model on top of it, and I'll talk about the direct lake feature as well. So let's start. Okay, so here I'm in a workspace. If you enable Fabric in your environment, basically you'll see something like this. Let me zoom in that you can see it better. So when you enable Fabric in your environment, you would see something like this, right? Which you have the choice to choose other workloads, not only Fabric. And these are all the workloads available at the moment, right? So I'll go and start with a data engineering. Here it is. Data engineering gives you ability to create an object called lakehouse. What is a lakehouse? Lakehouse is a combined word coming from data lake plus data warehouse. Lakehouse, right? What it does, it gives you ability to store data as a table, as a structured format, plus as files. So you can have your normal tables, like in a normal SQL Server database, tables, relational tables. And you can also have files. These files can be anything. It's not just Excel or CSV or those files. It can be image file. It can be video file. It can be any file. You might say, well, why do I need to store files beside the database, right? What is the reason for that? There are many reasons. When you get to use it, there will be a lot of situation to use it. For example, one situation I'll tell you as an example. Let's say we have a retail sales scenario. I get a lot of sales transactions. There's an invoice for each of these transactions. The invoice is in PDF file, right? And I have a Power BI report that shows like a table visual, every sales transaction. I want to be able to, when I click on that sales transaction, to navigate to the PDF file and see it. If you want to do something like that at the moment, where do you save those PDF files? Cloud storage, SharePoint, those kind of things, right? And then your actual data lives somewhere else, like SQL Server database or something like that. So something like this would give you the ability to have everything in one place, right? This is just one example, by the way. Okay, let's go and create that lakehouse, and we are going to just call it Lakehouse Barcelona user group. PUG wasn't a good name, right? Okay, so this is the lakehouse. It's a place that I can have tables as well as files. At the moment, I don't have anything. Let's get data loaded into this. I'll start with using Dataflow Gen 2 to load data into this. How many of you use Dataflow or are aware of what it is? Okay, for those of you who don't know what Dataflow is a Power Query transformation that runs in the cloud without Power BI, basically. It's a Power Query transformation that gets data from a source, transform it, load it into a destination. The Power BI data flows that we create, their destination is Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This data flow I'm building, which is Fabric Data Flow or Data Flow Gen 2, you can actually choose the destination to be whatever you want. For example, the destination can be, in this case, my lake house or warehouse or something like that. Right, so let's go and get data from Excel. Basically, this is a Power Query online experience, right? All of the sources that, not all of them, but most of the sources that you have inside Power Query in Power BI Desktop, you'll have it here. I'm going to use Excel as a source. Let's use this file, copy, bring here, next. Exactly like Power Query in Power BI Desktop, this will analyze that data. We'll show you a preview of what you have in your tables. Let's just select a few of these tables: customer table, product, category, subcategory. Let's select all of those. And fact, internet sales. Yeah, this one too. Okay, this is AdventureWorks Excel data, by the way. You can download this file from Red Hat website if you want. This used to be a SQL Server database sample, but I just downloaded as an Excel because it makes it easier for people to use. Okay, so I'm inside Power Query Online Editor in Power BI. For those of you familiar with data flow, this is like nothing new. It's all of that is what you had before, except the fact that we have data destination here. For those of you who haven't used this environment before, this is like your Power Query inside Power BI desktop, with the big exception that all of this is running in the website at the moment, right? Like, for example, the preview that we have in here is 100 rows. How many rows preview in Power BI desktop? 1,000. Yeah. So it's just 100 because it is faster to build a solution with 100. If you scroll down in your table, it will go and get some more data. Anyway, let's go and do some transformation here. So I'll switch to this diagram view. I think this is still doing something. I'll wait for this to do whatever thing it is doing. Okay. Now the diagram view. Okay, diagram view shows me all of the tables, which is a nice way that I can then, and I can apply some of the transformation right from here. So let's say, for example, dim product. Sorry, where did it go? Dim product, clicking here, merge query as new. Now, usually this is faster, but I think Teams meeting also makes it a little bit slow. So joining dim product with dim product subcategory, let's say I'm flattening these tables together, right? So based on product subcategory key here, product subcategory key there, I can choose the type of merge that I want. As you see, this is more beautiful than the Power BI desktop. The Power BI desktop experience is going to be similar to this, by the way. So let's select that. Okay. This is going to be taking some time today. Okay, as you see, the diagram shows that these two tables are now merged together. Waiting for this to come. Okay, here it is. I'm selecting a few of these columns. Let's say product key, product name, going all the way. Product subcategory, right click, remove other columns. Most of you worked with Power BI. This is simple Power Query, nothing really complex in here. Then I'll go and expand the dim product subcategory, and I'll select subcategory name and category key, because I'm going to use that then to merge it with the product category. All of the steps of transformation that I'm doing basically are available over here. I can click on each of these steps, and it will show me what the data would look like at that step. Like, for example, this is before I remove the columns. This is before expanding it. This is before I remove the column. So you have all of these steps. One last step I do here is merge queries, this time with dim product category. Based on product category key here, product category key there, clicking on OK. And expanding this one. Okay, that is the last bit of transformation I want to do. Okay, and removing this column. Don't need that key column anymore. You see a lot of null values here. That is not because the merge is wrong or something. It is the fact that not every product has a category or subcategory. If I scroll down, you'll see that there are products with category and Okay, so that's my transformation. Let's say this is the table that I've built. I'm going to call this table product. Rename product. Now this table, because I've created this data flow when I started the lakehouse, automatically has a destination. For those of you familiar with data flow, this is the data flow Gen 2 feature that gives you a destination. In this case, my destination is a lakehouse. I can change it if I want, but it is just a destination where it is. I'm going to just click here just to show you the process of choosing the destination. This is going to push data into a lakehouse. Let's click on next. Then I will go and choose the lakehouse. This is already set, all of that. I'm just showing to you one more time so that you can see the process. Okay, the lakehouse that I have in this case is in the Barcelona user group, something like that. Where is it? Higher. All right, yep, thank you. Okay, this is the lakehouse I have created. Now, when I choose this lakehouse, it says that this table, for example, doesn't exist. I can choose this to append the data in the destination table or to replace it. The default option is always replace. You can say, I already have some data in that table. I don't want this to be loaded again. I'll do the append. One thing about append, however, is that if you have a record in that table and you are inserting that record again, it will insert it again. It is not checking for duplicate. You have to check for duplicate yourself. Like, for example, in Power Query, merge it with that table first and only get the records that are not there. Anyway, in this case, I'm just using the the default configuration, which is replace, save settings. Now, this process can be done for each of the tables that I have here, right? Like, for example, one table can be in this, the destination can be in this lakehouse, another table can be in a different lakehouse, if you want to. Now, the other thing is that, like, if I click on any of these tables, you see their destination is still there. The other thing is that these three tables, in product, subcategory, and in product category, I don't need them anymore because their data is already loaded in the product table. But when I click on them, they also have that destination lakehouse available here, right? You see the destination lakehouse is this. I don't want this to happen. I can basically just delete this. This is similar to we had in Power Query in Power BI Desktop, like disable load thing. This is similar to that. So these tables are still part of the refresh process, but they are not getting loaded into that lakehouse as a separate table themselves. So removing this one too. And then the next one. Okay, yep, all good to go. I'll rename this data flow. Let's call it data flow adventure works. And then publish. So when I publish, what is going to happen? First, it is going to save this metadata, all of this information behind the scene. This is JSON. It is using M code. Of course, Power Query uses M code, but M code will be embedded inside a bigger code file, which is a JSON file, which is our data flow. That is the publish process or save process for the data flow itself. Once that is done, it is going to refresh the data, get the data from the source, apply it, and then load it into that destination lakehouse. You see the lakehouse that I have created actually comes as multiple objects. It's not one single object. The lakehouse by default comes with a SQL Analytics endpoint. It comes with also a Power BI semantic model. This is just to speed up your development process, because usually when you have a database, on top of that database, you'll go and build a Power BI semantic model, right? So this is basically gives you that process in a much easier way. Okay, this is getting refreshed. Let me go to the lakehouse and see if there is any data available in here. Refresh. Yep, the tables are coming gradually. Yep, here it is. Clicking on these just to see the data. Okay, here you go. So this is the tables inside this database structure, basically. And you see this little sign beside the tables? That is the sign of Delta format. I'll talk about that Delta format a little bit later. These looks like a database table, but in fact, the technology behind the scene is Spark, which is different. We'll talk about that. For now, consider this as a database table, right? What I can do is that I can actually switch this from the Lakehouse Explorer. What you saw right now was the Lakehouse Explorer. We'll switch it to SQL Analytics endpoint. SQL Analytics endpoint will look like a database management tool online. So this would be showing my tables in a database schema. In this case, I didn't really create a schema. Everything went under DBO schema. How many of you, by the way, are familiar with databases? Okay, most of the room. Okay, sounds good. So this is by default created under a DBO schema. I haven't changed that, but you can if you want to. You can also create views, functions, stored procedures, like a normal database, basically. And anything you do in your normal SQL Server database, you can do it over here. You can go and write a query on your data, for example. Let's go and do that. Let's say I'm going to write select top 10 star from product. Okay, let's run that. You can, of course, write much more complex queries. And the thing is that this would give you that IntelliSense as well, which is quite nice. And if you have Copilot enabled, also Copilot helps you to write that thing, which is even much more interesting. Anyway, we are not going to do Copilot demo in this session, especially because this is trial. Copilot doesn't work on trial. But I have a video about that. You can go and check it later on our YouTube channel. Okay, so you can actually build your query like this, or you can say, I want to create a visual query. Like, let's say I'm not a database person. I can basically go and build my query like this, drag and drop this. It's something similar to Power Query experience again. And okay, coming. And then I would say, well, let's merge this with, oh, I should bring product as well. Okay, let's say merge this with product, on product key here, product key there. Click OK. Let's just select the product key from here. I mean, product key was already there anyway. I didn't really need it, just a product key. Let's select something else as well. Decide it. Go back here. Okay, let's select all of these three. That makes it better. Okay, then I don't need this part. Let's remove that. Right, so I can go and build whatever I want, right? Let's say after I built whatever I want, this actually generates the SQL code for me. I can click on View SQL. This is the SQL code for that thing, right? If I want to save this as a view, I can save this as a view if I want to, right? But in this case, it's OK. I'll just keep it like that. Now, if I'm a database person, I would usually use SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, to connect to a database. We can actually do that. I can go to the setting here, and this gives me the connection string, which I can use to connect to that database like a normal database. So copy that, come to, I think my SQL Server Management Studio is opening. Let's wait for this to come. Any questions, by the way, so far? Yes? Yes, yeah, you can. In Dataflow, you can get data from a lakehouse. Yes, absolutely. OK, so in here, let's change this to database engine. Select that. Microsoft Entra, MFA. User is this. Connect. Now, when you connect to that, basically you are connecting to the workspace that includes that that database, right? So you'll see all the lake houses or warehouses under that. Okay, let's take
Fairly recent version of Management Studio.
it should be some of the recent versions. Yes, yeah. Not, for example, Management Studio version 15. No. Right. So here, this is my lake house, as you see. If I expand it, and you see there are also two staging lake house and warehouse automatically created. These are behind the scenes of what Fabric automatically does. It'll bring all the data in a staging environment first, then brings it into the lake house that you want. And these are my tables, right? So like a normal database, I can actually query this data over here. I can create stored procedures, views, whatever you want. It's like a normal database. Right? So far, sounds good. One big limitation. Limitation is that your queries, like whatever script you are writing, cannot update the data, cannot delete the data, cannot insert the data. It's just select queries, right? It is because it is a lake house. We have another object called warehouse. That warehouse would give you read and write functionality. But for now, let's just stay with the lake house. I'll show you, even with the lake house, how you can update the data. You can use a tool called Notebook. We'll talk about that a little bit later. OK, what was the other part of my demo? I talked about data flow, data pipeline. OK, yep, that is the next thing I wanted to talk about. Now, this data flow is my ETL process, right? And not this, the data flow that I created before. That loads data into this lake house. Now, I want to go to my workspace, and I want to put that in a more kind of like a structure, or let's say orchestration process that says, for example, run this data flow, set a variable date and time before that, set a variable date and time after that, so that I know when this started to run, when it finished the execution, things like that. And I can even apply some if-then-else structure, things like that, if I want to. Now, for that, I'll switch to Data Factory experience in here. Data Factory experience, one of the objects of that is data flow, which we already used. The other object is data pipeline. Fabric Data Factory basically combines the power of Azure Data Factory, which we had previously, which is good for data ingestion, like powerful data ingestion tool, not really powerful for data transformation, but great for ingestion, great for orchestration, combined with Power Query Data Flow, which is good for transformation. So let's call this pipeline Barcelona. I call it this time. OK. How many of you familiar with Azure Data Factory? Not many. OK. That's OK. I'll show you what this looks like. This part similar to what we built in Azure Data Factory, but still different. For those of you who haven't used this part or Azure Data Factory before, what this is, a pipeline is a orchestration tool. It's a tool that we can define the control of execution. We can say, for example, run this task. If this task was successful, go and do the other one. If it was failed, go and do something else. I can build a loop structure. I can build an if condition, for example, things like that. You build a control flow of your execution. How many of you worked with SSIS? OK, in SSIS, we had control flow and we had data flow. This is like control flow. And data flow is like data flow. Right? So let's go to the activities. You see, I have a bunch of activities here, like copy data, data flow, notebook, stored procedure, scripts, here if condition, for example, for each, or quite a lot of other activities, right? In this case, I'll just add a data flow activity. This is going to be that data flow I just created, right? So in the setting, I'll go and say this data flow. So this basically means that I'm executing that data flow. Before executing this data flow, I want to set a variable here, right? So that is also an activity. We call these activities. So this is set variable start, right? That is the activity. What is the variable? I don't have any at the moment. Let's go and create a new variable. I'll set the name of this to start time. Now, variable types here are just these 4 types. If you want to use date and time, you get a string, and then you convert it to date and time, things like that. For now, a string works fine for me because I want to use that in the context of an email later. So let's give it a string. Confirm. Now, where the value of this comes from, I can actually write an expression here that creates that value. This expression, fortunately, is not DAX, right? So it's much easier. It's a simple expression language. It's not even a language. It's basically expression. You'll have ability to use your variables, parameters, or functions. There are not quite a lot of functions. For example, in date side, I can, for example, go and use UTC now, which is basically just date time right now, and it creates it like that, right? As I said, it's not like Power Query expression. It's not like DAX. It is just a different expression language. Did I just press escape? I think I did. OK, one more time. UTC now. Click OK, and it just adds it away. Now, I want to say when this is done, go and run that one. Now, one thing about here is that each activity has these 4 states. Like when the activity executed, what is happening? On success, on failure, on completion. On completion basically means that either success or failure. On a skip. Who knows what on skip means? Didn't execute. But why didn't execute? There was another path that it didn't happen. For example, in a if-then kind of things, one of them always execute, the other one doesn't, right? So that is a skip. Good one, Bernard. Thank you. Right, so in this case, I just want on completion on this to go and run the data flow. Let's add another variable here. That variable. And now I could do all of that with one variable, but let's just keep it simple. I'll create another variable. Let's call it end time. End time. This is a string 2. This is also getting the value from function, which is UTC now. Click OK. And on success of this, I'll go and run that. I can continue building things on top of this. Like one of the interesting things about here is this. You can actually get your Power BI semantic model refreshed using this. Like how many of you using data flow at the moment have this challenge that after your data flow execution finished, you want to set your data set to refresh, right? How do you do it at the moment? Sometimes Power Automate. Sometimes you just schedule their times to be like far enough, right? So something like that would basically give you that, right? Now, in this case, I don't want to do that. Let's just finish this by an Outlook activity. Outlook activity basically sends an email, right? So after this, let's go send this email to, let's sign in. This could have been also Teams activity to send some notification, things like that. Hello, access. OK. Loading gradually. Now, everything here can be dynamically set. You can even set who is receiving the email dynamically from your variables, which makes really interesting scenarios. Sometimes you might have a situation that you want to send something to different people, different things to different people, right? So it is possible. In this case, I'm just keeping things simple, right? So let's just send an email to myself. Subject is pipeline executed, right? Subject can be also dynamic. And then the body can be dynamic as well. Here, I can actually use my variables. Start time, end time, and some really meaningful message over here. And let's say this is it, right? So that's everything, right? Let's save this and run. Now, this can be scheduled to run, right? And usually you schedule this. You wouldn't, in this environment, you wouldn't go and schedule the data flow by itself. You can do that if you want, but because this gives you more things around it, it's like a wrapper around data flow. You'll put your data flow inside this, and then you schedule this to execute. Let's just run this one manually for now. Save and run. This is going to take a little bit of time. to build it first. Now, this has some useful monitoring features as well, which is loading at the moment. For each activity, it tells like when it's executed, when it's started, when it's ended, things like that that you don't have in a data flow. Your whole data flow either executes or it doesn't, right? Having this ability to create the orchestration gives you a lot of benefits. Like, for example, you might want to say, in my data flow process, I want to first load all the dimension tables. If that was successful, then go and load the fact tables, right? So like 2 separate data flows. With just Power Query, you cannot do that easily, right? But here you can do that. Your first data flow, after success of that, your second data flow, after success of that, go and refresh your semantic model. It gives you that process, that execution process that we don't have with just data flow. Combination of these two gives you basically your fully like full ETL process. Okay, this is going to take some time. Any questions so far? Some best practices, things like that. Not that many at the moment, unfortunately. We have some patterns, best practices for Azure Data Factory, but not for this. So usually you'll have to like combine that a little bit with this, right? What I do suggest are building this in some of the old ways we used to create SSIS packages. For example, if you build SSIS package before, what we used to do, we always created like 1 package per, like one master package that runs everything, and then another package that runs dimensions, another package. So in this case, this would be 1 pipeline, master pipeline, pipeline for dimension, pipeline for something, and then goes. So build it really modular. You can then pass parameters between these. So it can be a really interesting project, the whole thing. Okay, this is still executing. One more question. Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants. So, like,
can you use this to do that? I think because one of the activities here is, let me see if I can find that activity. So of course you have the notebook activity. Like even if that activity is not here, we have the notebook activity. Notebook activity gives you that is executed. I'll show you the results of that. And notebook activity gives you ability to write a script. And a script can be connecting to your Power BI semantic model, for example, extracting this particular table, this part of it, right? Similar to what, for example, at the moment, DAX Studio Tabular Editor, they are doing. Like they are basically getting 1 query from your visual and then running it, exporting it, right? So your notebook code can be something like that. And then you can have it as one of the activities here. Like after this is done, after the refresh is done, let's. That is right. Correct. And those files can be then saved into your lakehouse. And then the email that you send, you can also send them link to those. So it can be done. Yes, the short answer. Let me just open my email just to show you what the email output look like. You might see other things also in my email that you don't want to see, but we'll go fast right into that email. Was there another question while this is opening?
You can only refresh semantic models in Fabric
capacity. You cannot refresh it if it is in premium capacity. Premium capacity is a Fabric capacity, by the way, but not PPU, not in Pro. Well, oh, okay, good to know. Okay, here it is. Of course, I didn't put really meaningful information, like just a start time, end time. I didn't even format it. I didn't even subtract these two to give like to have something. All of those are possible in that expression. This is just showing you the result at the moment. Okay, let's close this. Yep, close that guy. Let's see what is the remaining bit I wanted to talk about. Oh, okay, yeah, here it is. So this process that I have done loaded those 3 tables, of course, in here, right? We had it already. I have not loaded the date table, right? The reason that I haven't loaded the date table was that I already had a date table somewhere else, like in another database, in another lake house. And there isn't any point to come and create it again, right? I'm going to use that one that I already have over there. One of the ways that we can do this is using a feature in Fabric called shortcut. What is a shortcut? Shortcut is a link to another table somewhere else in my Fabric environment. If you remember from that slide, we talked about one lake being storage across everywhere. So if I have that table stored somewhere else in another workspace, in another lake house, it doesn't matter. Still, it is in one lake. As long as I have access to that, I can access to it here. I don't need to copy that data and bring it here. I can just have a direct link to that. Shortcut basically means that, a link to a table somewhere else. Now, that link can be to a Fabric environment, but it can be also to external sources, to a Dataverse table, to Google Cloud Storage, to Amazon S3 sources. Those are called as external shortcuts, but in this case, I'm doing internal. So using Fabric, I should have something here called General, Lakehouse General. Here it is, yes. And you see this is in a different workspace, right? So click on Next. Now this one, at the moment, just have one table, which is the date table. I'm going to select that date table, click on Next, Create. This is not copying the data. This is just creating a link to that. But the linked table or the shortcut table would look like a normal table over here with just one extra thing on top of it here, showing this little thing that it is a linked or a shortcut table. But everything else is the same. I can use this in a query. In fact, if I switch this to SQL Analytics endpoint, you wouldn't even see that icon in this view. Let's expand schema, DBO, tables. So here you see there is no difference between this table and another table, right? You can write your queries, join this with the other ones. You can even write into this if this was, for example, in a warehouse, and that warehouse had, because warehouse you can update the data, right? Assuming that you have access to do that thing, right? So it's not just a read-only link. It's a link like it is a table inside your database, right? So once I've created that, then I can do whatever I want in here. Now, the next stage I want to show you is that I'm going to build a Power BI model on top of this, right? So before building Power BI model on top of this, let me just show you the structure of the tables here. Delta Lake is the next one I wanted to show you. So how this database behind the scene is operating. This is not a SQL Server database. This is not a SQL Server engine behind it. This is based on the Synapse engine that we had in Azure before, but that Synapse engine behind the scene is using another engine called Spark. What is a Spark? A Spark is a big data processing engine. It's not for Microsoft. It's open source, but you can go and download the Spark just by itself, download and install it. Databricks uses Spark. Many other companies using Spark. It's a powerful technology. It is a multi-parallel processing technology that performs much faster than a normal database system. You cannot compare the performance of something based on Spark compared to like a normal SQL Server database engine, even if that database engine is on a real supercomputer or something like that, right? Because it is multi-parallel processing. There are lots of details in terms of like how that multi-parallel processing works behind the scene. One of those details is that how the tables are stored. Because this is not like a normal SQL Server database, these tables are stored differently. When I go to the Lakehouse Explorer, let's come here. Let's, for example, have a look at one of these tables. You can actually look at the data of these tables by clicking here, saying View Files. This format of storing data is called Delta Lake format, not Data Lake, Delta Lake. Quite a lot of similar terms in here. Delta Lake format is, again, another open source format, especially built for Spark. The Spark understands Delta Lake format. Delta Lake format is a format that files are stored. Basically, It's a bunch of Parquet files. I'll talk about Parquet in a second. And a subfolder, log folder. In the log folder, we have a bunch of JSON files. What are these? Back to this view. What is a Parquet file? A Parquet file is a file that stores data. You already know a format of file that stores data. CSV. Everyone familiar with CSV? CSV is a format that stores data, right? But CSV is quite easy to understand. When you open it, it's human readable, right? As soon as you open it, you understand what it is. It's like comma separated, row by row data. That is a format of storing data. Parquet is another format of storing data. CSV is not the most efficient way of storing data. CSV files are big. CSV files are storing every single value, even if that value is like repeated a lot of places, right? That is why CSV files can be quite big. Parquet files, on the other hand side, they are enhanced for writing and for reading. Their performance is better. Their file size is much smaller. How they do that? They use column stored storage format type of thing, which, for example, if you have a lot of similar values, it just saves one of those values with the index table saying that where that is changed and things like that. So Parquet file, much more efficient. Let's not get into the details. Much more efficient in terms of saving the data, much more efficient in terms of reading the data as well, right? I cannot open and see this data at the moment, right? But I don't need to, right? A Spark needs to understand it. I work with it with a normal table with SQL queries or with Power BI, right? Now, another thing about Parquet files, which is the most interesting things, I think, is that this supports something called time travel. What is time travel? Let's say we run this ETL process every night, right? When we come today, our data is changed from yesterday. Yesterday, it was something different. Now it is different, right? We can have this ability to look at the data as of, for example, yesterday this time, or 2 days ago at 5 p.m., something like that. This is called time travel, right? How many of you have had this wish that if I had something like that in Power BI, that would have been great, right? So this is time travel, and this format, Delta Lake or Parquet, supports that. The way that it supports that is that every time you, not every time, but most of the time that the update happens on the data, a new Parquet file is generated. And then this log folder, the JSON files here are basically keeping the information of which file has changed at what time. So here, for example, you see there was a new file added, this file, at this time, things like that. So these JSON files keep track of those changes. You have a bunch of Parquet files having the data, JSON files pointing to what file for what time. Combination of these two gives you time travel, right? You don't need to go and read this. This is all for Spark to understand it. The way that you would query it is like normal database query. I'll show you in a second how it works. So far, sounds good? Delta Lake format, understandable. Okay, now because we have this Delta Lake format, because we have these Parquet file as the storage in here, and Parquets are stored efficiently in a column store format that you can read data from it much faster, save data on it in a much more efficient way. Power BI, when you use it in an import mode, what does Power BI do when you do import mode? It would basically copy that data from whatever source it is, Excel, SQL Server, bring it, store it in its own proprietary format files in a column store way, right? Because it is much faster to read it, right? You don't see those files, but behind the scenes it's happening. So Power BI stores column store. Parquet stores column store. What is the point of like connecting to this, getting that, storing it again in a column store, right? So what Microsoft did was an interesting thing. They said, well, we'll change the Power BI engine a little bit so that basically it reads directly from Parquet, as if the Parquet file is Power BI its own file, right? So from Power BI point of view, this is the normal file that Power BI works internally with it, right? Basically means that when Power BI connects to this table, it works like import. It is already imported, right? It doesn't need to copy, bring it here. Another thing that it means is that you don't need to refresh the data because this is where the actual data is, right? So as soon as the data changes, Power BI has that change in the data. This mode of connection is called direct lake. It's a new mode of connection, similar to import, similar to direct query. It's not exactly like that. Like there are milliseconds differences, things like that, but it is much closer to import data than any other methods of connection, right? So far, sounds good? Yes?
Just one question.
This one, yep.
So this is due to the fact that the plan will generate this much of it.
Yeah, but I never seen any files under that. And this is not part of the normal, this is not part of the standard Delta Lake that every other company uses. I think this is something that Microsoft team added it. It is probably related to our data flow, but I never seen anything under that. Maybe during the execution of data flow, something creates there and then get rid of. I don't know what's happening, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. I've seen that recently. Yes. Each table. No, each table. You can do that for each table.
Delta feed or data feed. It's like a flag.
I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you an example of how to get it for that particular time. Yeah. Okay, how much more time we have, by the way?
Well, we're technically on time, but
okay, I'll take like 10 more minutes, show you something. Right, we haven't done the Power BI bit yet, right? Let's go and do that. So this lakehouse comes with, let's go back to the lakehouse. This lakehouse comes with a semantic model by default itself. I can basically go to there using my analytics endpoint, switching to the model view. Okay. In the model view, this is like your Power BI model designer, right? These are my tables. You see some extra tables also in here. These are some monitoring queries. We call them DMVs, dynamic management views, that are helpful to give you some monitoring information about how your warehouse, how your lakehouse are executing, like the last 24 hours, what queries took most of the time, things like that, right? You don't need to use it in your Power BI report that you build for your end users, but you need to use them in a separate Power BI report for yourself because you want to monitor the execution of this. We are not going to use that at the moment. I'm going to create relationships and build a report from this. We can use this, which is the default semantic model, but I do not recommend doing that here because this model editor that you see is like the older version of model editor. You don't see this anywhere in Microsoft documentation, but in order to get a better model editor, you have to go and create a new semantic model in here, right? So let's go and create a new semantic model. Let's select all of these tables. Call this Barcelona semantic model. Confirm. And that blue stripe that you see on top of these tables, that means the direct lake connection. If it is direct query, usually it's a solid blue line. For direct lake, it is a striped blue line. Okay, let's wait for this to come. So this new semantic model is using direct lake. Basically means that it is not really copying the data. Data is in the Parquet file. This is just pointing to that. But the performance would be like import performance. Wait for this to come. Okay, here is this. You see, this is a much better model editor. It's like Power BI desktop compared to that, right? So make sure that you create a new semantic model when you want to. Right, okay, so here let's go and build relationships. So internet sales to customer based on customer key to customer key. create relationship, exactly like the way you do it in Power BI Desktop. Date to date, let's do that based on order date to date.
Then show preview of the data.
Yeah, that is one of the bad things about it. Would have been better if it had that. So hopefully at some point soon.
You're doing the opposite direction.
Yeah, that is why I'm doing it this way, because if you do it the other way, it takes the relationship in the wrong way. Okay, so this is my model. I can even do things such as, for example, hiding the product key column. I can build like a hierarchy. So things that you do in the modeling in Power BI Desktop, it's not like 100% experience like that. There are still things that is a little bit harder to do in here compared to doing it over there. Also, you cannot create a calculated table thing in here, because, sorry, a column and table, because it is a direct lake, right? One of the limitations of direct lake. Now, it might be possible later on. They are still working on some kind of solution for that, but you can do other things. You can build measure, you can use calculation groups, row level security, all of those kind of things, right? For now, let's just keep it like that. I'm not going to change anything. Let's just go and create a new report. You don't need to save this. This is automatically saved. I'll go and create a new report. Okay. And for the report, let's just build something simple. Sales amount. Come on, nothing happened. Just drag and drop. Come on, do something. Doesn't like it. Okay, I can do that one more time. Where was my model? Here. New report. Yes, yeah.
What about the, well, maybe, what about the cost?
Oh, expensive question. The cost for Fabric, basically all the costs in Fabric is capacity based. There is no per user license. You purchase capacities, and the bigger the capacity, the more expensive the cost. We have this from F2, which is on $260 a month, all the way to F2048, which is like a super expensive one. But these are like hourly pricing, based on hourly pricing. If you get like their monthly contract, it is cheaper. That F2 would become like $150. Everything would become like 40% cheaper. F64 is equivalent to P1. Yeah, it's a monthly thing, but you have the yearly contract. So yeah, those Microsoft things, you know. Okay, let's say this is a super complicated report that I've built, and let's just save this. Call this report report 1, because I don't think I have any other report. Report 11, just in case. Okay, so this is my report. I want this report to automatically refresh because I want to show you that direct lake functionality, right? I'll go to my report page, and then in the format, have you used this feature that you can refresh the page automatically? It's a quite cool thing. You can open this and say page refresh every 1 second. Now, by default, you cannot do 1 second. By default, like minimum is like 5 minutes. But capacity admin can go and change it. You can say 1 second is also possible. But if you do that, then you have to remember that this is consuming quite a bit of capacity, right? So, so let's say that is the thing. Save. Let's go to reading view. And you should see a little thing here. So every 1 second, this is basically trying to refresh based on what the data changed. This is a report refresh. It's not the semantic model refresh, by the way. So based on what I told you from the direct lake, this means that if we update the data, this should change without us going and updating the semantic model. Let's go and check it. Now, we talked about the fact that you cannot update the data of a lake house using a SQL script. So it has to be updated either using data flow, data pipeline, Or what we can use is a notebook. Here's my notebook. Notebook. Here it is. Okay. Notebook. Notebook is a data engineer tool, like Jupyter Notebook, basically. If you are in data engineering space, you are familiar with that. It's a place that you can write codes in 4 different languages. You can connect to your lakehouse. In this case, let me connect to my lakehouse. This lakehouse. And these are the 4 different languages that I can use to write my code in. All of them are like Spark SQL, Spark, or PySpark, or Spark Scala, because behind the scene, the engine is a Spark. This is the Python customized for a Spark. It's not full Python that you have if you download and install it. It's a little bit different. Or the SQL is not like the SQL that you write everywhere. It's similar though, right? Anyway, I'm going to use this. I'm going to just update one of these tables. I can change to a Spark SQL. And apparently, when you change that, this is not smart enough to remove these 2 lines. So it comes with an error. So you have to remove it yourself. Update. What is that table name? Fact internet sales. Set sales amount to something that is different, 350, right? I didn't put any where clause or something like that. This basically means that if I run it, every single transaction in that table would be this. So that number that was, do I have that report open somewhere else? So that number that was $29 million should change significantly, right? So let's go and do this. Let's just run this. Now, the transaction itself doesn't take a long time, but the spinning up an instance connected to the Spark engine behind the scene takes a bit of time. You see, the connecting time usually takes a little bit more time. Once it is connected, the execution of this runs on that multi-parallel engine behind the scene, which is a Spark, which is really fast, right? So let's wait for this to come up with that update. Any questions? This is time for one more question now. Yeah.
It's funny to see open source culture inside Microsoft Cloud.
Yes, yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so that number is updated, and this should update soon. Come on, yep, here it is, right? So it's not instant, but this is good, right? It's like a real-time project without really using the real-time analytics engine. We have also a real-time analytics engine that we can use it like to have an instant update. But this is great, right? Now this is using this ability. I'm almost wrapping it up. Ability that if we go to the semantic model under the setting, the ability is called reframing. But here under this, you see it under refresh. Now, what is the refresh of semantic model then? Because we talked about the fact that it doesn't really need refresh, right? The semantic model connects directly to that Parquet file. This is called refresh, but in fact, the actual term for that is reframe. You know, when the data changes, new Parquet files generated, right? And if Power BI is still connected to that old Parquet file, Power BI doesn't know new files, right? So this process basically is to inform Power BI that the new Parquet file is generated. Go and look at that rather than this, right? This is that refresh. It's not really the data refresh, right? We call it data. We call it reframing. Is there a reason you might want to turn it off? What is the situation you want to turn it off? Yep, that is good. If you are doing an ETL process, right? Sometimes your ETL process is fast. Let's say 2 minutes, you get all the data, right? That is not always the case. Sometimes you get your dimensions loaded first, then your fact tables. The whole process might be like 45 minutes or something like that. When your dimensions got loaded, if you have a user looking at your Power BI reports, your dimensions have data, your fact tables doesn't have up-to-date data, they get to see some weird numbers, which is not the correct numbers, right? If you have someone looking at the data at that time. Sometimes you run it overnight, there is no user looking at it, right? But in situations like that, it is good to turn this off and then refresh it inside your, for example, pipeline at the end of your data flow or things like that, right? So situations like that. But otherwise, you'll just keep it on. The default is also on. The cache in Power BI.
Can you reframe, yeah, then last query.
I think it can be.
That's not
Yeah.
what I got from the college.
Right. Okay. I have to check that. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. One last thing I show you, and then we close this. The time travel. Right? Question? You want to see it? Time travel. Okay. Now, how does that time travel work? So, of course, one of the things about time travel is that you have to have your data changed, right? So that you can go and see it, how it is changed. I have another workspace with another. Where's my workspace? With another lakehouse, like one of those cooking classes that I have cooked this before for you. You can go and have a look at it. So this is the lakehouse, right? I'll open the notebook related to that. Where is my notebook? Here it is. Now I have updated the values of a table multiple times so that I can check it. This table is inside this lakehouse, and this is the table, right? It's a prediction table, something like that. I've ran update statements like this some times ago, right? I can use this Python code. In this case, I'm using Python code to do time stamping. But if I have a warehouse, you can even do that with a normal SQL code, right? Which makes it simpler. But this code also looks complex, but it's not really. What it is doing, so the first part here, let's skip that import for now. Here, what it does, it basically reads a delta format table. All the tables are delta format. Which table? That table. Right? This is the name of that table. So basically reads it, put it in an object. We call it data frame. This is Python code. And then just get the sum of trip distance from that. Right? This is the current value without timestamp. Now I'll do that one more time. This time I just add this option. Timestamp as of this. Right? If you don't want to include time, things like that, you can skip it. Then usually it always consider like the 000 as the time. But that's it. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a value change right at that time. It would tell you at this time what the data looks like, right? Let's just run it, because the rest is just that, right? This is getting sum of trip distance from that, and then just format it. It says current value is this, old value is that. Let's just execute it. I already executed it once, but let's just do that one more time. And as I said, this is, you can do it in SQL if this was a warehouse. In SQL, that option timestamp comes at the end of your query. Sometimes you join multiple tables, you put that. This means all of your tables at that timestamp. Sometimes you just have one table with this timestamp, join it with another table with another timestamp, things like that, which can be really interesting. Okay, I think this is executed. So current value is something like $80 million. The old value, or at least the value at that point of the time, was 359,000. Right? This is how the timestamp works. Really simple, with one big limitation. The limitation, there should be always a limitation, right? The limitation is that this only supports 7 days. Right? So you cannot really use it for timestamping your data for a year or things like that. This is not a limitation of Delta Lake format. Delta Lake format supports this type of change, right? So it can support like years of change. This is a limitation that Microsoft team put there because this means that you have all those history tables, right? More Parquet files, more JSON files. It is going to be huge, right? They put that limitation to just control that, right? At some point, they might give you this option to change it, to make it like 30 days, something like that. I don't know that yet, but at the moment, 7 days, you cannot change it. You cannot do anything about it. Databricks, which uses the same format, they have 30 days in their default thing. My feeling is that this is probably going to be customizable later. For now, 7 days. Sounds good? Okay. That was pretty much everything I wanted to show you. if you have any questions, we'll cover those questions. Link to my blog, link to my YouTube videos, all of those free information you can go and use. Any questions? Yes.
At the beginning of the session,
Yes.
the opinion that the fabric has the same level of functionality
That those have. More and less. that is the answer. Like, for example, just giving you some examples. Like, for example, in Azure Data Factory, we have things that we don't have here yet, like mapping data. Right? We don't have that here. Right? We have to build something similar to that. Right? Or there are things that we have in Synapse that we don't have in here, right? But then we have things in here that we don't have in there. Like this direct lake basically is something we don't have it with any of other combinations. Or ability to run a Power Query data flow inside the data pipeline that we have. Recently, that is also added in ADF, but that is like a lightweight version of Power Query. It's not this Power Query, right? So sometimes we have more things here, sometimes we have more things over there. But the whole approach is that they are bringing all of those features in this. Much more support is happening at the moment in the Fabric side than the Synapse itself and Azure Data Factory. It doesn't mean that Microsoft wouldn't support those, but the long-term thing is that bring everything in this side. Yes, yeah, you can bring that. At the moment there are, yeah, and at the moment there are some things that might help you. Like, for example, if you have ever used, for example, mapping data flow or things like that in Data Factory, for example, there is a GitHub project that a couple of guys from Microsoft Cat team, they did that. They wrote a script, a Python script that convert your mapping data flow to a Spark code. Then you can put that Spark code in a notebook here and run that. Right? It wouldn't be exactly that experience, but at least it's a way to like bring things here. Yeah.
So yeah, you want to customer and but what would be your approach to decide the capacity that they?
Yeah, that is a good question. I always start with the minimum capacity, but one of the things that, like F2 even, but one of the things that I wouldn't suggest is to have one capacity for the whole organization. Now, that is the thing that, again, in Microsoft documentation, you like one capacity is enough, things like that. But the reality is that you don't want to have the same capacity for your end users using the reports and use the same capacity for your developers doing some data engineering things behind the scene using Notebook on a Spark engine, right? If these two happening on the same capacity, one of them would, like the other one, consume some of the capacity units. If you use, for example, Copilot, that is another thing. Like the users might start using Copilot and consume all the compute unit, then you don't have any compute unit to use your refresh of your data flow, which is a critical thing, right? So I do suggest using your capacity in a smart way rather than just increasing the size of the capacity.
I'm not really sure. I think that when you do like a capacity reservation, this is different from the actual capacity itself. So you kind of like reserve like for an F8, but then purchase like 2 F4.
Yes. Yeah. But I would usually start with like F capacities first, adjust it a little bit, let it go for a few months to get the right combination. Like, for example, I'll need, I don't know, like F8 for my developer team, and then one F64 in my, let's say, user framework. Once I get to that situation, then I would switch to RI. That is my approach. But not necessarily. I mean, it might not be the best, but yeah. That is right. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Do you plan to use or teach or study about the new airflow engine inside PUG?
Airflow, yes. Yeah, that is one of the things in my blog pipeline. So it will come. It's an interesting thing actually, because we had it in Databricks to use the Airflow. Now here we are going to use it. It's a little bit of engineering experience, coding experience, but it's a really useful thing, powerful for big scale data transformation. Yeah.
Orchestration even with no.
You can do that if you want to. Yes, yeah, possible. Yeah. Yeah, would be a bit complex process, but yeah, possible. Okay, thank you everyone for attending, and I'm here if you have any questions later on. Just come here.